we're going to do an update on the HoloChain developments relative to the app. And then we're going to talk about this meta strategy that involves Jennifer. And wanted to have Kerry on the call because he and I had talked several times about some sort of project potentially linked to the game he's developing on his property there in North Carolina. And given what Jennifer was proposing earlier, it makes sense to loop in all of this so that it's all acting as a synergistic whole instead of us trying to do just one big thing that's not connected to and therefore leveraging the other things that we're trying to do here. So let's start with an update on the app from Gheric, since Gheric has to go in about 20 minutes. And then Gheric, if you can just stay on as long as you can, that would be great, so you're in the know on what else we're talking about here.
Yeah. So last week I did a deep dive on HoloChain. I looked at their APIs and just read more about how their technology works. Read some related research papers. It was all really interesting. And basically, I think that HoloChain is, it looks like it's a great platform to build something like Copiosis on top of. It is a little bit confusing because they have some different things going on. There's Holo and there's HoloChain. Holo is their market for HoloChain apps, but HoloChain itself does not have any kind of notion of currency or tokens or anything like that. So it also works very differently from like typical blockchain technology. I mean, it's not blockchain. And so, whereas the blockchain model is based on this kind of global consensus where you have this global definition of truth or what has happened. And the HoloChain is different. It has a local definition of truth, which is agent-centric. So essentially, the way I think of this for Copiosis is we would have almost as if each agent or each individual, each citizen is running their own version of the Copiosis algorithm or the Copiosis app. And that app is only maintaining a local definition of truth at any point in time. However, with these convergence algorithms, maintaining a global notion of truth can slow things down a lot. So with these global blockchains, they're extremely inefficient because all the nodes on the network have to come to an agreement on what's true. With HoloChain, each agent keeps essentially its own chain. It keeps its own notion of what's true. But you can still have global consistency if you design the application in a certain way. In other words, even though you may have a local definition of truth, all of these local definitions of truth can still converge globally on the same definition over time if the rules of the application are follow certain rules. If they follow a certain way of defining the way that state can change in the application. For example, one of the papers that was referenced in the HoloChain documentation talks about this thing called Theorem, which is basically a way of designing eventually consistent decentralized applications. And it's kind of complicated, but it sort of comes down to as long as all inputs for an application can be handled in any order and they produce the same output, then you can eventually converge on the same global state. So what that means is any kind of events that happen in the world or transactions that are observed or whatnot, as long as these are as long as these are always additive, as long as they're not being changed, it's just more information comes in. It doesn't matter if the order of that information comes in a different order, or if two different agents disagree on the order in which those events were received, as long as the way that those events are used in the calculation, the outcomes can still be the same over time. I don't know if that's clear, but there was something that you wanted me to explain, Perry? I can't hear you.
Yeah, that's what I wanted you to update us on, with where we are with regard to HoloChain. It sounds like what you're saying is this is a technology we can use without necessarily being even connected to the HoloChain community, which is good news, right?
Yeah. I mean, so their technology is open source. They actually recently released a version 2 of their code, which is supposedly more optimized. And looking at the earlier version, they already had a bunch of like hackathons all around the world where people were building all sorts of things. So it actually looks like it's in a pretty good state to build things in general. Like people have built working things with it. The only issue with their version 2 is it's still the documentation really isn't ready yet, and it's not fully tested. So I think they said they only support running on Linux right now, whereas eventually the way it's written is designed to compile into what's called WebAssembly. WebAssembly is basically sort of a highly optimized subset of JavaScript, which means that eventually the HoloChain engine can run directly within a web browser or a mobile application on your phone, meaning that you won't need like a back-end system in order to be a node on the network. Each device can be a node in the network.
So that's really good news for us, because our previous version of the software ran on an Amazon Web Services software or platform, which was very expensive for us to run. So having it being able to run on specific individual network devices is, presume would cost us nothing, right? Yeah, so it's a huge cost saving. That's fantastic to hear. Okay.
And I don't know if I don't know how soon that's going to be available. That portion, being able to run a node directly on your phone, it might be a whiles away. In the meantime, we might still be able to leverage their Holo platform to do that. Otherwise, we'd have to figure out how to basically replicate what they're doing with Holo and host what they call they changed the word. Well, at one point they called them containers, and they switched them to conductors. But HoloChain conductors are basically, you can think of them as the engine that's coordinating between all the nodes on the network, and that's booting up instances of the applications that are on the network. Each application has its own rules or DNA. If those rules are modified, then that application is booted off of the network of other applications that have that unmodified DNA, which means, if each person's running their own instance of the Copiosis app, and if they were to hack their app or whatnot in order to reward themselves more in BR, that changes the app's DNA, which means that app is no longer compatible with the rest of the network. And so that person's app just won't communicate with any of the other apps.
Perfect.
And that's all built into HoloChain.
That's fantastic. And then if we're running on the HoloChain platform, because we aren't able to use that device specific or that decentralized device-based platform, are we going to need HoloFuel to run?
Yeah. If we're running on Holo, we'll need HoloFuel.
And if we need HoloFuel, do we have to have a cryptocurrency?
Well, it's just a matter of buying HoloFuel.
Okay.
So whatever. I'm sure there's some kind of exchange where it's available, but I don't think the Holo network is functional yet. I'm not sure.
I don't think so either. Okay. All right. So this is everything that we've just talked to up to now is gonna come into play as we start talking about this meta thing that Jennifer has kind of kicked off. Let's see. Just so, Kerry and Jennifer, you guys understand at least to some degree what blockchain is, and okay, good. So you're understanding the importance of this technology to copiosis. Okay, good. So the only other thing that we're missing at this point, of course, there's some development required, but the only other thing we're missing at this point is the ability to integrate data into the algorithm, and we're hoping that the liquid intelligence folks will provide that functionality. Right now, we're having a little bit of difficulty getting their attention because they're so focused on their startup, which makes sense. But hopefully down the road, once our podcast becomes live and Jared shares that with Dr. Brock, there may be some more opening to get Gheric more directly connected with liquid intelligence, so we can start exploring that platform. So Jennifer, have you been following along? Do you know what liquid intelligence is?
No, I don't.
Okay, so it's an AI company that has a specific type of AI that seems to be critical to being able to integrate the data we need from society into our algorithm.
Okay.
Yeah, and so we're really hoping that we can get connected with them so that we can test out their platform and find ways to integrate it into what we're doing.
Okay.
Okay. Gheric, I have one other question about Holo relative to something that you had sent me and Dan Schmidt had sent me, this other community called Pion, I think it's called, or Pion. Are you familiar with that?
Not very familiar. I looked a little bit into it. It just looks like a new marketplace for products and services that are sustainable and less evil.
Okay, so generally it's not something so compelling that we would move from HoloChain at this point.
I don't really see anything super compelling about it. I mean, it's still based on a currency market. I think they have this. It's like a form of tax where any products or services within the ecosystem, there's a percentage of the transactions. There's a fee. That fee goes towards sort of like a pool that is used for funding different kinds of projects based on a vote.
Okay. Is it exclusive to that community? Like, could we do a HoloChain development and then have that community potentially fund us?
Possibly. I haven't thought that much about it.
Okay, that's okay. All right, cool.
All right. I got a quick comment on that.
Yes, please.
I appreciate you digging deep into that, Gheric. That was a great explanation, and I think it provides a valid platform and digital infrastructure from which we can start to realize what copiosis is capable of. And then, when you look at it in comparison to the system that exists now, it was that last piece that you mentioned about the holofuel. And it reminds me of, comparable blockchain systems where you have to pay the miners to do the calculations and store the data in the blockchain. And then with Ethereum and how they had their gas fees, but then the gas fees exploded and became very expensive over time. So do we know or have any idea of the volatility of that holofuel price over time? Do you think it would be sustainable, or do you think it would increase as more people use the system?
I have no idea, but I think, like I said earlier, the long-term plan would be to not have to rely on Holo or holofuel at all, because the HoloChain app could run directly on people's phones. Once they compile it down to WASM. The interesting thing is that, you know, because HoloChain is itself, the core technology isn't tied to any kind of token or currency. We can directly test out NBR as an incentive for getting people to run the network. So that'll be cool.
Yeah, that will be cool.
It will, and I hope we get to that true decentralization quicker than not, because, you know, manipulation is a terrible thing. And then it just the fact that there's a fee charge to move things around within a system, you know, that mimics the current system. So, but I know we have to start from somewhere and then build into a what we want. So I just wanted to state that.
Awesome. Okay, any other questions on what Gheric shared about the technology? Okay, good. Let's open up this conversation then to the interesting idea that Jennifer is inspiring. So I'm just going to give some preamble here. Unless you want to do it, Jennifer, do you want to?
No, go for it. I'll piggyback. Go ahead.
Okay, good. So Jennifer's been familiar with this innovation longer than I have. And so she's very familiar with what we're doing. She also owns her own agency that represents celebrities, and also has worked significantly with the Democratic Party, or I should say in politics. And so she has suggested that it might be a really good opportunity to connect Copiosis with a celebrity through some sort of a celebrity representation or sponsorship. And then she also talked with me about the idea of having us eventually get on a pretty high level, either podcast or television show. And then she also talked about potentially having attract a production company to do either a reality show or a docu-series on either on Copiosis or a Copiosis project that would be functioning. And then, of course, all of this started with a conversation about some sort of education initiative, which Jennifer and I also talked about, that might look like some sort of nationwide contest where students could participate in answering a question or developing an essay around something related to Copiosis, and then we get media coverage for that. So what I see potentially happening here is that we kick off with some sort of an education along the lines of what I said. That would generate the media interest. That could potentially be parlayed into attracting a celebrity who might be willing to be the, I don't know what you'd call them, endorser or sponsor or something like that.
Spokesperson.
Spokesperson, yeah, that's a better word for it, yeah. And then that could potentially get us onto a show like Dr. Oz or Joe Rogan's podcast, or even Young Turks. Are you familiar with Young Turks? Or even Young Turks or something like that. We talked last Friday about this. I don't think you were there, Jennifer. Were you? No, you weren't. Okay. And so what we came to was that in order for us to really leverage such a large strategic opportunity, we really need to have something like something that people could plug into once they saw us either in our docu-series or a reality show or a podcast or something like that. And that's why Gheric is now kind of turning up the volume on developing an app, because an app that people can download would be a perfect follow-on to seeing us on a show or hearing about it in some way. The other opportunity would be to have a book that people could download. Yeah, there is. So there's a lot of noise coming from somebody. Who might that be? Maybe we could all go on mute. Okay, there we go. Is that better, Gheric? Yeah. Okay, so the other thing that Jennifer had suggested was if we had, it's still noisy. Huh. Somebody is in a kitchen or something? Jennifer's on mute. Okay, that's better. Okay, so the other thing that Jennifer had suggested was that we have a book available that people could download. And of course, there's Copios as an introduction, but there might be another book that we could have. I'm working on a book called For the Winners that's actually, I just looked at it this week, and it's a lot further along than I thought it was. So we could probably I could probably develop that book in line with the app so that both could be available by the time we had traction. So the reason why I wanted to have Kerry on the call is because I think given everything that I just described that Jennifer and I talked about, I thought it would be really advantageous to have something going on related to Kerry's game and his property that would lend itself to a reality show or a docu-series. So at this point, that's the preamble. At this point, I'd like to kind of open it up to just conversation and see where this goes. And maybe we start with Jennifer and then maybe have Kerry describe a little bit about his game and where it is and his ideas for the summit that we were talking about, Kerry, several months ago. Okay, I'm going to go on mute.
Okay, well wow, that was a good enclosement of everything that we talked about. No big dreams there. So yeah, I guess, you know, I'm in an instant gratification market, and if we're gonna try to move this to the next you know, stage with it, you have to work on the people that just, you know, I go by something they call a TLDR, which is too long didn't read, which is a political, you know, term for bills. And I'm a too long don't read a lot of times, so I have to think of ways to come across a little more simplified for the world and just for people in general. You have a 5-second attention span before people start tuning you out. So I also deal with a lot of children's programming, especially in my county, and I have access to nationwide coverage with that as well. So I would love to start working on very simplified things for children, storybooks, just little things to really just start getting that preschool demographic in the mindset, because, you know, generationally, that's probably who's going to be enforcing it by the time all this, you know, goes down is our little kids. So because they'll be 40 or 50, hopefully it'll be sooner than that, but realistically. So as far as celebrity goes, it's names and celebrities are what you would consider known names. So I know Russell Brand was a name that had popped up. So anybody that you are thinking of, we can definitely reach out to their people, their management. If I'm connected to them somehow, definitely we can put that letter. I'd like to do a proper proposal to them that's very simplified, you know, that just kind of gives what their duties would be with marketing it, because you're probably, they're not going to understand everything right off the bat before they would start spokesing for it. Just, you know, they're not going to be experts in it by the time they're talking about it. So as far as on my resources, I'm just going to leave myself open and availability as much as I can to this. Like Perry said, I was handed a copy of The Invisible Hands when I was about 25 or 26. So 42 now. So I've probably not as technically advanced as all you guys in it, but I definitely understand the concept. It's something I'd love my child to experience, you know, at some point in her life. So I think a web series would be a good start, something between maybe 15 to 20 minutes. If it involves the game on your property, Kerry, that would be something that we could do little snippets of. I mean, you're definitely going to want to look for the juicy tidbits, which would be to get people interested. It's going to be a little bit of the drama, so you might have to kind of embellish things a little bit more, not lie, but just, you know, kind of pump it up a little bit more on the entertainment side of it, where you know, maybe you show like drastic differences. If this part of the game produces this outcome, what it would be like usually, to kind of show like a big drastic difference so people can kind of get the impact of it, if that makes any kind of sense. So other than that, I'll let you guys ask questions, but that's kind of where I am with it. And I'm taking notes on all this, and I'll leave this, I'll send you the Google link to it, and then you guys can see everything that I'm writing down. So, questions?
Kerry, maybe it would be a good idea at this point to describe where you are with your game, and maybe a little bit about what we talked about, if you can remember, about the summit that you and I had discussed, or would you like me to do that? You're on mute, sir.
I've been working more on the game in the incubator than I have the summit, because that's the third level. So let me start from the bottom. Basically, this game is built on the same core paradigm that Copiosis is, which is this infinite interconnectedness of it all, and of us all, and you know, it all hooks together. So you just can't operate outside that. The second thing is the idea of scaling. In my business life, started half a dozen companies, and we would design the smallest piece that could do the thing we were wanting to do. And then you'd start multiplying it, and then you multiply locations. And then the third element is, you know, the gamification. So what I'm hoping to do is, this game has the same form as Monopoly, except you flip that up. Monopoly was a finite game, and Weopoly is an infinite game. And its core difference is there's no winner take all, because what we're trying to do is grow the value of your square, but also the value of the commons. And scale it from a board game to our festival grounds. We've done festivals for 6 years that are very photographable, because there's a whole section for kids in fairy costumes, and then there's the whole maker's row and displays on making, and the food part's crazy. So it's photographable. It'd be the kind of thing that would Instagram a lot. But the way the process of incubation, from learning the principles on the board to creating an offering in the marketplace, to creating a business in the community, and then becoming part of this model of a regenerative community, to me, are 4 steps in a bridge that gets us closer to the level of Copiosis, which is global, I assume. But you know, we're scaling it from the smallest way you can experience it to local to regional, and then we're going to hand it off to you guys and go, okay, you know, how do we make this network out into many more demonstration projects? So Jennifer, you're the expert. If you can figure out how we shoot that, you know, the event, and then kind of do a docu-series on zooming in on all the little design thinking labs of the participants, and how they are conveying how they're going to get these initiatives to grow net benefit, you know, to the beginning, net benefit to the board, net benefit to the market, net benefit to the community, net benefit to the network of communities. The DNA is the same all the way. So that's what we're playing with, and we got an unseen hand of our own, and that is that the land itself has an energy that people notice within about 30 seconds when they come. And it's going to influence participants. They're going to be going, you know, this really feels good here. I wonder what's going on. But it's really the whatever, you know, it's the oldest mountain range in the world here. There's something about it. It's fueled the successes of our retreat center for over 35 years. So that's just our little hidden gem.
What did you have dates that you were looking at for this event?
Yeah, I think we can pull this together. I need to run the incubator online because I've got to pull in the participants. I think late next summer is possible.
Okay.
And you mentioned the guy in England, comedian. What's his name?
Russell Brand. Russell Brand.
So Russell has interviewed Charles Eisenstein quite a bit, and Charles might be a little esoteric for a large part of the market, but he'd be a great spokesman for this particular project since he's very familiar with the land and a good friend.
Okay. Okay. All right. So late 2021. And then what kind of equipment do you have down there? Do you televise or do you film your own events, or what else, like what are you working with down there?
Well, that's part of the challenge. This is always, because this will have to be kind of post-COVID, because this is very, people together. And I only now just trying to stretch it into an online version of it all, and I'll be able to do some online. But kind of the culminating experience is live. And so that may even push us a little further out.
Right. So yeah, live streaming is fine on any, pretty much anything, but do you have cameras that you work with down there? Do you have access to anything like of good quality?
We had a big event live streamed here a month ago and then 2 months ago, but we usually get an outside source to come in and bring in it.
So, all right, and then production company. Okay, so I can look into celebrities with their own production companies that may be interested in doing something as well. So that could be the first step on names.
Well, we work with a company here called Three Flames Production, and they're actually moving here and very interested in being part of what we do. So those resources will be here by then.
Okay.
Hey, Jennifer, I have a question for you. Is that time, assuming that COVID lifts by then, late 2021, and this is a question for Gheric too, is that enough time considering all the things we're doing?
I mean, if everything stays virtual the way that it is, I mean, there really is nothing but time to kind of prepare for something like this. It's not an extensive amount of time, but I think we could get a web series off in that amount of time. You know what I mean? Like it might, and then from that we can pitch to other networks if it doesn't get picked up sooner than that, depending on who's involved. So yeah, I think it's enough time to start a web series at the very least, which would be fine. That would be fine.
Okay.
And having the Copiosis YouTube channel and getting all that kind of up.
So okay, so let's back up a little bit here and talk about all the things that we mentioned and see where the best what the best order of these, the best priority should be. So does it make sense to start with the web series, or should we, and I'm totally ignorant here, I'm asking an ignorant question. Does it make sense to start with the web series, or should we start with the education component first?
It could be the same. What I mean is like just using YouTube as the platform, whatever content everybody decides on what they want to come out with, just using the YouTube platform as a start. And then we can pitch to like networks and things like that. Because that YouTube is a great outlet for what this is, and if it's a docu-series, it's a web series, if it's an educational piece, if it's sorry, I keep getting like all these calls as I'm talking. Sorry. Can you guys hear me? Sorry.
Yeah. That's
okay. It's like as soon as you talk, that's when everything goes on. Yeah. So so whatever course you decide to go with, however it is, YouTube is the best channel. A year from now is a good time. I guess it's less than a year, but 9 months from now is a decent amount of time to get it done. If we're not going for very many, maybe like 3 or 4 parts, something like that, like a 3 or 4 part, whatever it is. to start off with would be reasonable.
Okay.
Okay.
And then Gheric, is that enough time to develop an app?
Yeah, I think so. It doesn't need to be complicated, right?
Okay.
Simpler the better, right? Right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Christopher, did you have a question, or were you going to say something?
Yeah, a couple quick comments. You know, when Kerry was speaking and mentioning the fundamentals of the Weopoly game, it definitely sparked some passions inside of me, because, you know, I always compare the current system to the system that we're trying to create here. And, you know, when you mentioned the word festival, that triggered the, you know, the concept of the tragedy of the commons, you know, and scarcity economics. And then, you know, through some evolution and conversation, we created this concept called cooperation that would lead to, you know, allocated amounts for participants that would be able to sustain the scarce amount of resources into perpetual, you know, existence. And people thought that was two separate ends of the spectrum. So you have like tragedy of commons on one end and then cooperation on the other end. And I would argue that it extends further than that. I'd say cooperation is right in the middle. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have what's called the festival of the commons, or the comedy of the commons, which involves this abundant peace, which is a plus sum game where, you know, participation increases the standard of living of the individual that's participating and everybody else that's participating in the festival. So, you know, that kind of concepts, those kinds of concepts are important to bring into this conversation, because you know, people just stop in the middle most of the time, because, you know, even when you're going from scarcity on one end to, you know, enough for everybody on the other end, you can argue that enough for everybody is still right in the middle, and that's not abundance in general. You know, you can argue that there's a different definition there for abundance, because it has nothing to do with you know, central planning. So enough for everybody, who decides that? You know, it's like, no, it's kind of in the middle to me, in my opinion.
Chris,
Yeah.
it's interesting that you use the word cooperation, because one of the differences between HoloChain and the blockchain technologies in general, is cooperation. With blockchain technologies, their convergence algorithms rely on cooperation, and that's what slows everything down.
Yeah.
With HoloChain, there's no cooperation. There's convergence without cooperation.
See,
Since you mentioned festival again, what I'd really like to see is something with the excitement of Burning Man. So, like, what's at the core of that, other than just outrageous expression, that we could put in to where these kinds of events could be created anywhere? That's ultimately what I'd like to see.
That's it. Copiosis festival each year. Yep, that's it.
so then one more quick comment. I agree. I really like the strategy that you're bringing forth here, Jen, because you know, we're in America right now. We're shifting into change, and you know, I've been keeping track on you know, the digitization of the voting process and making it more secure, and you know, I've been advocating for digital blockchain voting for a while now, but there's going to be 6 pilot projects coming out here in the next 4 months, and there's a reason for this, because you know, state legislatures set the laws by which voting happens within the state, and then the counties administer those laws. So these 6 pilot projects are facilitated through the state, and it's like Colorado, California. There's a couple other states. but then the counties are the ones. So there's 6 different counties that are going to be testing these with local elections in April and May. So, and it's opt-in. So that's a good piece. And if we can, you know, the claim is we can do millions of ballots in a couple of seconds with 100% accuracy, you know, question mark, you know, that would be a profound change, and hopefully that would lead to, you know, the beginning of this path that I've laid forward in a few of our previous videos here. But and I think it would coincide well if we had some type of system showing the vision and the transformation. So I agree with that 100%.
So Jennifer, so this doing the series on YouTube sounds compelling. It's obviously easier to do it that way, and if we can attract some network to be interested in that and then have them pick that up, that would be the holy grail. But until we get to that point, how would we, in your mind, fund such an initiative?
You know, I can't really say what the holy grail is at this point, because right now the majority of people are not even watching cable. They're watching Netflix, Hulu, or some type of internet-based thing. So that, you know, YouTube is all inclusive. I mean, it gets all your demographics together. It gets people who watch the cable access channels, and it also gets people who only watch internet programming. So that's, you know, that's why it's just a good platform. You know, eventually we could just do a Netflix deal or you know, something along the lines of that if like Bravo or E doesn't like pick up something like that. So to fund it, it's being more strategic about the resources that you already have and what you're doing. So, you know, if Kerry's doing the game down there, making sure that there's a camera there recording as much as possible so that you have the content for these web series. And if you have this production company, I don't know if they're, you know, the only reason I had said we could reach out to people with their own production companies that support it is because of funding. So, you know, if you have to pay 3 Flames to film everything, you know, that's where we might run into hiccups. Whereas if you got somebody who has their own, you know, production, like Jamie Kennedy, I'll just throw that out there. He's got Malibu Films. And if he was interested in it, Malibu Films might be sponsoring it to do it. That's the only reason I said that. But, you know, my thing is to give as much work, paid work, to local business and smaller businesses as possible. But if the funding isn't there, sometimes, you know, it's that tit for tat kind of thing. Basically, if you are a 501c3 at all, maybe you want to go for your 501c3 status with Copiosis so you can start going for grant funding, so that you can start going for local block grants for random things. I'm with a grant program now. Most of the organizations in my area are all grant funded. So that's something, you know, you would be able to do your Facebook fundraising a lot more easy. So if you have a specific project, you could say, okay, 1,000 members of Copiosis, you know, we're doing this fundraiser to create this web series. We need to raise $500. It's going to go towards whatever cost that we have. That would be the next step on acquiring some funding. Having a celebrity endorse or something like that. You know, we do signed autographs for charity all the time. So signed merchandise, those different outlets will bring in some funding as well.
Okay, that's really good feedback. So what do you guys, Gheric and Christopher, what do you guys think about the 501c3 route?
I had considered it before. I think what she's saying is totally accurate, and you know, the facilitation of grants, they can come in from both private and public. So it's an interesting piece to the puzzle, and you know, the liabilities would I would take a look at any liability. But other than that, I think it's a good idea.
Gheric,
Yeah.
any feedback?
I don't have enough experience with 501c3s to know really what the implications would be, but it seems like a good idea. So that said, my opinion doesn't count for much here.
Okay.
Well, at least
So
looking into, yeah.
Yeah. So I've been on boards of 501c3s before. I'm on a board of one right now, and I'm very familiar with the model, and I've avoided the model because it's heavy in terms of process, and there are a lot of requirements in terms of regulation. But the advantage, of course, is the nonprofit status and the ability to get grants, which you usually have no access to if you're a private company, which is what Copiosis currently is. We had considered having the Copiosis organization, what Larry calls an invisible hand, a payer organization is what we call the Copiosis organization, Jennifer. And so we had talked about the payer organization being the 501c3 arm of Copiosis. And so maybe now is the time to start thinking about doing that, and then having that entity drive this initiative.
Yeah, because Copiosis itself doesn't have to be the 501c3. You can have an arm of it that can collect all those donations with the message of Copiosis. So
that's exactly right. Yeah. And then the other I'm going to call it a disadvantage, but this is just my perspective. The other disadvantage of a 501c3 is you have to have a board, and the board can slow down decision making and even put the kibosh on decisions that the executive director might consider crucial to happening. And so there's a lot more politics involved, and the decision making gets kind of slowed down in a nonprofit because of its structure. So those are the reasons why I had not formed initially Copiosis as a 501c3, but it seems like that's the way to go now.
And there's say that again. I believe initially you need 3 to 5 members. I think it's 3 members and then 5 for the board. But there's also alternatives, and I have to look at all the rules. There's not just 501c3s, but there's 501c4s, and there's other versions of it that you can collect different types of funding on. Like a 501c4, you don't have to report. So a lot of them are more politically driven. You can't be a specific political organization, but you can kind of favor an opponent when you're a 501c4 because people can put large amounts of money and you don't have to turn those into the IRS. So, people can be a little more secretive, but there's a whole different version. So maybe, because there's churches and schools, which are also nonprofit organizations, but they're under a different tier. So maybe there's a different tier that it would fall under where you wouldn't need that type of board, but hopefully these, would be your board members, the people that are on the same page as you. And, there's always overpowering people and kicking people off boards all the time. I know that. I see it on a daily basis. So, so everybody better agree. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so the scope of this whole thing has just gotten broader because we're talking about a new organization for Copiosis that would be at the center of all the things that Jennifer is talking about. And it seems like the right timing to kind of pull that together. Do you guys agree? Yeah. Okay.
Kerry, have you got enough folks kind of inside the organization where you could feel confident about a board?
Oh yeah, we've got plenty of people to fill up a board. It would be great to have a couple of outside people like yourself, perhaps, to be on such a board to help inform where we're going. In fact, it'd be fantastic if we could get Dr. Brock or somebody like that on the board also, obviously.
If you use sociocratic meeting governing systems, you bypass those locks a lot.
What is that?
Sociocracy or holocracy.
Oh,
dynamic
right.
governance. We've used it for quite a while.
Okay, we'll have to look into this. I did not figure that a nonprofit structure would come up this soon in this conversation, but it seems to make a lot of sense moving forward.
I'm
So speaking
just
of moving
really
forward,
involved in it. So it's like the first, you know what I mean? I have everything I do right now. I have a nonprofit myself that, you know, we do, it's education through entertainment. So it's, you know, basically it's a way for me to get funding on the projects and the volunteering that I do that educates people and brings, you know, these types of messages across. So.
okay. Would you be available to work with me to create a similar structure?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Fantastic. So going forward then, what do you see are the steps we need to be taking to actualize everything we're talking about here?
Well, when you have these meetings, you know, do you have an action plan at the end? Like everybody's, you know, delegated something and they have a duty and they come back and so, because that would be like the first step of just delegating like tasks out. So I guess, you know, having Kerry, you know, research those dates, making sure that that's when those filming, you know, that's when we could film down there, making sure that the COVID restrictions are, you know, where they're at for your state, who's going to be available. That would be one task, you know, to kind of start moving forward. I take pretty, you know, not copious, but copious notes. And, it's just good to kind of go back to see, you know, that paper trail. I don't know if you guys have been doing that or you do that or how you guys operate, but that's just one of the first things is having an action plan at the end of each meeting that everybody goes out, does these specific tasks, and by next meeting they're done. So the next steps I would say is for Kerry to have that information. You know, maybe Gheric making sure that you have a good timeline on that app, you know, so you can look into it to make sure that we are working with real numbers there on filming. Kerry, you'd also have to find out that the people involved would, you know, sign those photo releases and be comfortable with being filmed and things like that. Do you guys have a virtual office set up with, you know, just documentation on anything, or is it kind of just right now everything's verbal and on video?
It's pretty ad hoc right now. We have a Google Suite available to us.
Okay.
We haven't had a lot of task management at this point.
Okay.
We just kind of started that a couple of weeks ago,
Okay.
but we don't have a whole lot of tasks that people are working on other than the kind of organic things we're interested in.
Okay.
Kerry, with regard to your property and the game, isn't there some development still necessary for the game before we could pull the trigger on anything? You're on mute still.
I've got a guy working on a website for it, for the incubator where it starts, and he'll work on the Weopoly next. So we're probably 3 months away from having something that I can put out and start attracting collaborators.
Okay.
I don't think it'll take any longer than that.
Okay. So I guess with a timeline, it's going to be based on, you know, that input from when you release that incubator and getting the input back and the feedback from people who are interested. It's going to kind of be based off of that, and then Gheric, your app development being completed. So you know, at this point, I guess that's kind of it's a tentative timeline, but at least it's something that we're working with, and if it has to be pushed a little further, it does, but at least it's something. So right now, I would say having the virtual office started to get set up so we can start having folders for permit notices, for photo release forms, just so everything is all in the same spot. That would be my first line of action, making sure that the meeting minutes are all in there so we can have a clear line of who's responsible for what. And even if it's not something as detailed, you know, task management as a G Suite has really good task management things, but I think just us having these meetings saying, hey, Perry, could you look into that? Hey, Gheric, could you look into that? Kerry, could you do that? I think that's fine for right now for what we're doing.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot. We have Facebook Workplaces set up.
Okay.
Which has almost everything you're mentioning. So I think we could use that going forward. But before we go much further on the tasks, and I know we're running out of time, I wanted to ask, we're out of time. I wanted to ask Kerry, we haven't actually we haven't actually extended to you an opportunity to say yes or no as to whether or not you want to participate in
Oh,
this. So Kerry,
yeah, no,
by the way.
this sounds like a lot of fun.
Okay, good. All right, so we should probably invite Kerry to the workplaces. We should probably invite Jennifer to the workplaces. Workplaces, the Facebook office, virtual office.
Okay.
And we'll get everything set up there. And then my tasks, it sounds like, will be to investigate further how to form the 501c, whatever it's going to be. So I'll take that on. Gheric, it seems pretty organic what you need to be doing. And then Jennifer, maybe if you can work with me on what you know, and we'll just move forward here. Does that sound good for everyone? Okay. Any questions at this point?
I was just curious about Weopoly. How do people win? Is there a win state?
That's a good question. A little complicated to answer, but yes. The bank on the board is directly linked to the complementary currency in the community itself. And that currency is anchored in land. So you actually do gain. I mean, you can grow yourself into a house in this process. But there's no end to it, because if this gets too full, we just add another node on the network. Until, as Pinky and the Brain used to say, until we get to world domination.
All right, well, it sounds like the stakes have been raised for Copiosis with this gigantic project. So looks like Jennifer lost reception. So we'll end now. We're a little bit over time. Thanks for sticking with us. Gheric, thanks for staying the whole time. Really appreciate you doing that. And we'll pick it up again next Friday. I'll be we've been kind of absent on workplace, so I'll be reactivating that. Jennifer and I will get some to-dos out. We'll invite you, Kerry, to that workplaces. Michael, I know you're on. We'll get you invited to that too, and we'll just start rolling forward. And then we'll look at next week Friday at the same time for a follow-up meeting. Okay. All right. Sounds good, guys. Thank you so much for being on. Bye now.
Thanks, everybody.